Welcome to Bookwrights House, where stories come to life and authors feel right at home. Today, we have the pleasure of engaging in a rich and thought-provoking conversation with Reverend Dr. Albert Reddick. Good afternoon, Dr. Reddick. I'm Elijah Barcelona, and before we dive into our discussion, on behalf of Bookwrights House, I'd like to express our heartfelt gratitude for joining us today. We're honored to have the chance to explore your work and delve into the messages behind your writing. So let's get started.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Dr. Reddick, can you share what inspired you to merge your two works, Becoming One and the I model for overcoming racism, into this book?
Yes, delighted to be able to do that. In 1998, I was pregnated with this baby.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Keith A. Russell, American Baptist Seminary of the West, was my advisor on my doctoral dissertation. And the doctoral dissertation, the I model for overcoming racism in an age of diversity. And the question he asked was, first of all, I needed to prove that racism existed at the university. So as a result, I was started with a cultural audit loaded with statistics. And I wanted to read the background. First of all, the mission was to overcome racism through diversity. Fear of something is the root of hate for others and will eventually destroy the hater. George Washington Carver, 1864 to 1943. And he says, I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Voltaire, 1694 to 1778. And as I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master. This expresses my idea of democracy. Whatever differs from this, to the extent of the differences, is no democracy. Abraham Lincoln, 1809 to 1865. And I had an opportunity to introduce this verse to the Rotary. And in today's world, we are forced to choose from paper to plastic at the grocery store, boxes of briefs, Blue Devils or Tar Heels, to more heavy-hitting contrasts like Black Lives Matter or law enforcement, church or state, Democrat or Republican. The tragic flaw with these false choices is that there are only two of them, that these choices are irreconcilable, or that today's choices, as framed almost everywhere we go, capture the enormous complexity we face in this nation, culturally, economically, morally, politically. Now, is it that far-fetched to place great value in civil rights while at the same time supporting the police? Is it realistic to hold forth that the church maintains a monopoly on moral standing and the greater good, while our governments are devoid of any moral compass guiding our policies? If we are either a Democrat or Republican, are we then expected to blindly subscribe to the platforms and platitudes of our party, all while firewalling off any and all ideas from the other? Sadly, these false dichotomies are all too often accepted and, more importantly, adopted and internalized as the guidepost for how our nation should conduct its affairs. But even more disturbing, these either-or scenarios are forcing us to choose sides on issues that can only marginalize us at best, but will polarize our communities at worst, all while shedding the fabric of our society, one painful tear after another. For today I'm here at the Rotary to offer you a new possibility for how we conduct our affairs, both on a personal and a social level. I'm here to renew the possibility of our United States truly becoming one, both on a personal-to-personal level, as well as on a group-to-group basis. For if this great experiment in democracy is going to reach its full potential in our nation, we must truly face our differences and our choices and our diversity, and then rise above them and recognize that our differences in culture, differences in affluence, difference in skill sets, differences in thought, or indeed our strength. We must explore this possibility before the divide becomes too great. Exploring the possibilities, I believe in the possibility of our nation to unify on our way to becoming one. The possibility of our nation embracing our differences and our diversity, and the possibility of unlocking the true and full potential of these United States of America. Clearly, our nation has done great things. Through a convergence of hard work, innovation, faith, and divine providence, America has been and remains the beacon of hope throughout the rest of the world. Yet internally, within our nation, this divide that we don't just know, but that we feel, does limit us. Our potential as a nation has been shackled and represents and even strategically ignore a flavor of these false dichotomies that have pervaded public discourse and policy information formation, and even our town, our state, and our nation most recently. Therefore, I believe that as we may be sitting there in front of me right now, wondering how in the world do you expect me to believe that embracing diversity and differences can unify our nation to become one? Don't differences just on their surface result in division? Don't differences by their very nature mean that we are not unified? How could differences be a unifying force in America? After all, aren't there bound to be different opinions, values, and motives, all massed up together in this diversity salad bowl that we are striving for? How could this possibly be a template of becoming one? And I will tell you that these concerns are valid, they are true, and they are heartfelt by almost everyone who considers them. And in fact, by themselves, these differences will and have divided us. Yet there is a key element here that we may not be considering. What is it in these United States of America that we all share? What do we all have in common? How, in fact, are we all the same? These are the questions that motivated two of our nation's pillars 50 years ago, in 1968, when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Attorney General Robert Kennedy were leading their effort towards America becoming one. Reverend King was a self-proclaimed dreamer. His dream was that little Black boys and Black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. And there are signs that this dream has in fact come true. Just look around and take a look at who's holding hands, who are dating, who are getting married, who are having children. Have you gone to the public private schools lately, colleges and universities lately? What do you see? Further, have you looked in your family lately? Black, white, Hispanic, black, Filipino black, German black, Asian black, Latino black. These folks have put their differences aside and have become one. Bobby Kennedy, too, was keenly interested in this underprivileged in our nation. But rather than being a dreamer, King, like Bobby's efforts, were strongly rooted in reality. Like many of you, Bobby knew that the road to becoming one and a truly United States of America would be difficult. And yes, King the dreamer. King the dreamer. Dexter and Bernice, you had the opportunity to grow up and live with a dreamer, but you didn't know who the dreamer was. Dr. King was a spiritual giant like the late Billy Graham, who truly believed in God and as the source of our becoming one. As we look to see, the two of you have been sleeping for 40 years and you never knew who the dreamer was. As a result, you've slipped through a revolution of diversity. I didn't know what diversity really meant until I traveled to South Africa. And when I flew over the snow-covered mountain in the summertime, and when I landed, the first thing, I fell on my knees and thanked God that I was home at last to my motherland. And the one thing that I saw was everywhere I looked, everything was black. Every store I went into, they were black. Every business I went into, they were black. And then when I went to Cape Cod, down at Cape Cod, where the water on the right from the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, one is hot and one is cold. And the penguins were black and white. I realized and understood what white America felt. But I also discovered that there's only one God. It's not a God for black folks. There's not a God for the civil rights movement. There's not a God for the Ku Klux Klan or white people. There's only one God. And this baby that I have been carrying has come to life. It's come to maturity. So I say to Bernice and Dexter, you have wasted 40 years because you didn't know that your father was a dreamer. You turned to fight for the things that he fought against. He didn't believe in racism, but that was not who he was. At Chester Crozier Seminary, he fell in love with a white girl, but he couldn't take her home. His father came up and wouldn't allow him and said, you can't take her home. You see, God had already birthed the dream of diversity in him. And that's why love was the center. We got to love everybody. And we're saying to you, Bernice and Dexter, you have an opportunity to get it right now. 2 days ago, you witnessed a young couple, an African-American young lady who's married to a white man. And they stopped at a church because it was Black History Month. And they thought that they would experience and celebrate Black history. But when she got there, she discovered the toxic atmosphere that has been created. Here she was. She knew who her husband was and was not the man that they were talking about during the slavery. And we have allowed African Americans to use the race issue when it has nothing to do with race. It's all culture. And as a result, in this nation, in this past election, according to Ephesians, Jeremiah, there are only 3 people in this world that God has created: believers, non-believers, cardinal men, and worldly men. And one of the dilemmas, the second edition has been added. President Obama has done a great disservice to African-American community in this nation. He believes in what we call education as the tool that if you get educated and go to the leading universities in the country, you should be able to make decisions that's best for the people. That's a worldly view. Jeremiah Wright was right when he says, you are not equipped and ready to be president of this United States of America. Because what you've set in motion is you've created another family at odds with God. There's only one family in this nation. And that family is between a man and a woman. And I've been praying for President Trump. And God has answered our prayers since 1998. God can use whomever he chooses. Trump acknowledged that there is a God. And why? Because he had a traumatic experience at his campaign when that bullet went through his ear. And he realized if he had moved 1 second, he would not be here. So God gave him an opportunity to be used to his glory. So he's acknowledged that there's only one family in this nation. That's between a man and a woman. He's acknowledged in this nation that there is no other LBGT, and lesbianism is a negative force in this nation. It's at odds with God because there's only one family. I support you, and I believe that this is God's manuscript to help bring this nation together as one. And I believe you at the right place at the right time. Martin was able to recognize on his trip to Taiwan that he saw the greatness of China and the power of China. And here we are in the midst of an atomic bomb. Because see, God knows what happened in Nagasaki when this nation dropped the first atomic bomb. God hadn't forgotten that. So as I close, this baby is ready to become one, to be born, so that this nation, America, can have the opportunity to become one. And we must love one another because there's only one God. Thank you. Lastly, there have been some individuals in my journey and I understand why God has prepared me. Number one, I had the opportunity to sit at Duke University under the leadership of and the class teaching of Dr. C. Eric Lincoln, Dr. John Hope Franklin, in his manuscript, Up from Slavery. And then one great young lady who was responsible for writing of white privilege in America, realized that whites do have a privilege because of society and culture and justice. We have the opportunity now to make America one again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reddick. So, speaking of the institutions, what role do you see institutions like schools, churches, and businesses playing in the fight against racism?
In other words, individual and institutional, because there's racism in the institution. So the institution, beginning with its staff, its employees, must have the courage to face the truth of the culture. And institutional, the government, and especially the schools, should be beacons to establish and to bring about oneness. Kids need to know that love is the reason and love is the answer. And prevent African Americans from seeking a case to target police officers, to get a case, intentionally targeting police officers. And while other African Americans sit along silently knowing that they're involved in drugs and they have criminal records and they're out of control, because then they are the beneficiaries of the case. And then through forgiveness, African Americans fought in the Civil War on both sides. So God required us to forgive. The price has already been paid. We're free. Slavery is not going to happen again unless you allow and continue the fight with evil. We should do good. Seek peace and pursue it to bring our nation together as one.
Okay, so in terms of the nation, what advice do you have for the leaders who want to foster unity in increasingly diverse environments?
For example, politics is playing out right now in the nation. It's the first time in the history of the nation that we've had the Speaker of the House, a devout Christian, who espouses forgiveness. And I understand that both sides have to come together, because Democrats have not been given the answer. If you look at what has already occurred, it's certainly evident they don't know what has occurred. And they are part of the problem as well. But we all have to become one. And we have the opportunity now for the nation to become one. But it takes courage, spiritual strength. And I believe the president says, operating from strength, with a desire to attempt to mediate the forces in this country to stop another nuclear holocaust. Only God could do that.
Okay, so what are your hopes for the future regarding racial unity and equity in America?
My hope for the future is that the nation will recognize that God has replicated diversity on the shores of America. And if we look at Asia Minor, when this Taipei young Chinese queen was sitting outside on the patio, drinking hot tea, and a silkworm fell in her cup. And from that silkworm falling in her cup, she discovered silk. And silk became the model economy for throughout the world. They traveled to China to purchase silk. Just one instance of God, how he uses individuals and his awesome wisdom and knowledge. So we have that opportunity now to recognize that he has replicated diversity on the shores of this nation. And African Americans can no longer use the toxicity of African American history to claim that there is a God for blacks and a God for white. There's only one God. One God.
Okay, so lastly, we'll talk about personal connection. So, what has been the most fulfilling part of writing and sharing this book?
Fulfilling part is that I'm free now. I don't have to wrestle to carry the baby anymore. The baby is out. I'm free. And all I want to do is to glorify God as I live out my days with truth and honesty. And we can only worship God by truth. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but he's given us a spirit of power, a spirit of love. To love one another.
Can you say a few words on how the readers can engage further with your work or participate in initiatives aligned with your model?
Yes. Our goal is that this model, it is a model that can be replicated. It is a model that is substantive. It's a model with hands-on experience and participation that each group can participate in, and it can be replicated across this nation. And our goal is to start revivals in this nation. I was a Billy Graham to spread the word, because it's only through the power of the Holy Spirit that can transform the lives of individuals. So that's our hope, that the publication of this manuscript will provide resources and funds to further this work. This is our goal.
Okay, so before we end the discussion, can you show us the physical copy of your book? And can you say a few words to invite your readers to read your book, and where can we get a copy of it?
We'd like to invite you to pick this manuscript up. It can be found on Barnes & Nobles, as well as Amazon. It can also be found at Reader's Net, most particularly and important, Reader's Net. Powerful magazine, Publishers Magazine.
So that brings us to the end of today's insightful conversation. Dr. Reddick, thank you for sharing your wisdom and passion with us. We wish you continued success with Becoming One, Volume 2, The Diversity Salad Bowl, Open Mind, and in all your future endeavors. We look forward to the continued impact of your work and best of luck on your journey.
Thank you.
To our viewers, thank you for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as we have. Until next time, keep reading, keep writing, and always create space for meaningful stories. See you again soon at Bookwrights House. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.